It is a popular misconception that I spoke with John. I did not.
That's Art Bell in October 2015. The John he's talking about is John Titor, the alleged soldier from 2036 who appeared online with a time machine and a warning about the future. Art doesn't hedge. He says that he didn't speak with him. And yet, some longtime listeners remember an interview. Some remember more than one. They remember Titor explaining his machine, the IBM computer he came back to find, and the future he said was coming. So either a major Art Bell interview disappeared, or something more interesting happened to the memory of it. To find out, I treated 23 years of late-night radio as one body of evidence, tracing the story across several kinds of records. The interview isn't in the archive, but almost every piece of the memory is. That meant searching 1,399 surviving episode transcripts, then checking the key moments against the surviving audio. It's a substantial record, but it isn't every hour Art ever broadcast. Absence alone cannot prove that an interview never happened. Here, it doesn't have to. Art gives us the answer in his own words. The transcripts show us how the memory formed. Across years of broadcasts, they separate what happened on air from what became attached to Art later. The answer is no interview. The investigation is everything that made one feel real. On the Art Bell subreddit, one listener asked whether anyone remembered Art's interviews with the time-traveling John Titor. Interviews, plural. The replies don't agree. Some say there was no interview. Others remember a call, an anonymous fax, George Noory, Art's online forum, or people who later told the Titor story. Other famous time traveler calls get mixed in too. This isn't a survey, and the memory isn't universal, but the confusion is real. These aren't random inventions. Most of the pieces actually happened. They just didn't happen together. The first piece arrived in 1998. On July 29, 1998, Art opened a time traveler line. The premise was pure Art Bell. Call from any time after the year 2500. Near the end of the program, he read a long fax from someone claiming to be a time traveler.
Please let me explain. Time travel was invented in 2034.
The message goes further. It talks about CERN, contained singularities, branching timelines, and a barrier preventing travel beyond the year 2564. It places the writer in 2036 and warns about Y2K and a future nuclear event. Read now, it sounds remarkably close to the John Titor story. But listen to what isn't there. There is no John Titor. No time travel zero. No claim that the writer is a soldier. No mission to recover an IBM 5100. On the broadcast, this is an unsigned fax. Art can't identify the sender, and neither can the recording. Later histories of the Titor story attribute the fax to him, but that is a retrospective attribution, not a fact established in 1998. This distinction is the hinge of the story. The fax can connect to the later legend without turning its anonymous sender into John Titor by default. What the broadcast proves is narrower. Art read the words of an alleged time traveler on air years before the name John Titor became famous. The recognizable John Titor story comes together more than 2 years later. By November 2000, an account called Time Travel Zero was posting at the Time Travel Institute. The year 2036 was already in the fax. What was new was a persistent online persona and a mission involving an IBM 5100 computer. In early 2001, the discussion moved to Art Bell's post-to-post message board. There, the name John Titor became attached to the account. This is where the confusion begins to make sense. Post-to-post belonged to Art. Listeners exchanged messages with someone calling himself John Titor on an Art Bell property. Those exchanges were direct and connected to the show, but they happened in text, on a forum. They were not a conversation on the radio. The surviving forum record is incomplete and reconstructed, not an untouched copy of the original board. Still, the association is powerful. An anonymous time traveler message had been read in Art's voice. Then a named time traveler appeared on Art's forum. With time, they feel like chapters of one encounter. The story had gained a name, direct exchanges, and a home on Art's own forum. It still had not gained an interview. Then there's Coast to Coast AM itself. On August 6, 2004, Coast devoted the first 2 hours of a program to John Titor. The guest was Oliver Williams, who had collected and documented Titor's posts. The host was George Noory. That part of the memory is real. A long coast-to-coast program about John Titor, with someone telling the story at length. But John Titor wasn't the guest, and Art wasn't the host. When Art corrected the misconception in 2015, he added that he thought the discussion had been on The Other Show. This 2004 program may be what Art remembered. Over time, the network and subject survive. The host and guest blur. The result is the intuitive version. Art Bell interviewed the time traveler. Art did talk about Titor on the air. That may be the strongest ingredient of all. In October 2013, a caller asked for his thoughts on the case.
No, I just thought your thoughts on John Titor.
Well, I'd love to interview him. Those are my thoughts.
It's a wonderfully Art Bell answer. More importantly, Art still wants the interview. Later in the same program, a caller known as Florida Jim says he interacted with Titor on Post to Post in 2001. Jim tells Art about those forum exchanges. Listen to how close this gets. Art is on the radio. John Titor is the subject. A caller is describing direct contact with Titor, but the caller isn't Titor. 2 years later comes the correction from the opening. Art calls the interview a popular misconception and says Titor is still welcome to contact him. The invitation remained open because the interview had never happened. Callers kept mentioning Titor through Art's final years. The name returned in Art's voice and on his program, always around the edges of the expected interview. Art spoke about John Titor. He spoke with people who discussed John Titor. He invited John Titor to call. He did not interview John Titor. Now put the pieces on one timeline. In 1998, Art reads an anonymous fax from someone claiming to be a time traveler. In 2000, Time Travel Zero appears online with the story we recognize. In 2001, John Titor exchanges messages with listeners on Art's forum. In 2004, Coast to Coast airs a long Titor program with a different host and guest. Then callers bring the name back to Art. They discuss the predictions and forum exchanges. Art says he wants the interview. Every connection in that chain is real. Nothing has to be invented. The false part appears only when the correct pieces are joined into the wrong event. Art is connected to the anonymous message. Titor is connected to Art's forum and to Coast. Art is connected to later conversations about Titor. Memory supplies one final line between Art and Titor and labels it interview. That isn't foolish, it's how memory works. It keeps the subject, the voice, the program, and the direct exchanges. Who spoke, where, and when are the parts that blur. The Reddit discussion rebuilds this process in public. One person remembers the interview. Others reach for the facts, forum, Noory, representatives, and other callers. Together, the thread identifies the source material for a broadcast that never existed. The remembered interview isn't random. It's a compressed version of events that really happened, attached to the voice and program that connected them. So, did Art Bell interview John Titor? Based on the surviving record, no. The corpus contains no interview, and Art's own denial closes the gap an incomplete archive would otherwise leave. What did happen is more revealing. An anonymous 1998 fax Art read was later attributed to Titor. A Titor account appeared on Art's forum. Coast to Coast aired a program about him with another host and guest. Art discussed the story and asked Titor to make contact. Whether John Titor was a real time traveler is a different investigation. This one is about what happens to a story after the broadcast ends. One broadcast can preserve a story. An archive can show how the story changed. What Art Bell memory should I test next? Leave it below. That's what this channel is for.